Picking up again, regarding the energy that runs what appears to be life out there is the same energy that runs the consciousness in here. The exact same energy. And let's see. Let me take at least one of the examples I was using last time again. Refresh your memory. The fact that an oldies act, the Temptations, 5 guys, none of the Temptations, none of the originals are still in the group, but it doesn't matter. They're still making a living off the name. People will show up and listen to them. The whole night will go more or less as planned as far as the audience was concerned. As far as the whole, if we looked at this nightclub, everyone that comes in, the owners, the faux Temptations, everybody involved, the night will go along and produce the general outcome that everyone expected. That the people showed up, people hired the Temptations, they know it's not the original Temptations. The bartenders show up, the waitresses show up, the Temptations show up, the backup band shows up, the bouncer shows up, the doorman shows up, the crowd starts coming in, they pay their $5. If they have any sense and are interested, if they really keep up with the Temptations and they're not brain dead, they know that who they're paying to see is not the original Temptations. Not a one of them. They know that. But the assumed outcome, the intention of the whole evening is for the audience to have fun. Temptations and everyone that's not paid, not part of the paid audience is to have fun. The rest of them is to make a living. At the end of the evening, all of that has been accomplished on the basis that it was a fraud, notwithstanding the basis it was a fraud. On the other hand, if we have the oldest act, Edgar Winter, playing down the street with a pickup band, 3 local teenagers backing him up, and he passes by and he sees the Temptation playing and he thinks to himself, what a bitch. When you're an oldies single act, when you're a single act, you've got to show up in person. Because it would not do for a fake Edgar Winter to show up. And I was pulling that out having to do with consciousness. And you could take the nightclub the same as I did the courtroom scene earlier, the other example. But you could take the nightclub scene as being a microcosm of life, and you could see it as being a macrocosm of one man's consciousness. And what it amounts to, what I started picking up, was the point that ordinary attention, ordinary consciousness is diffused. The way I was describing it in the courtroom, to use what appeared to be a confined example, being a microcosm for life too, you recall, and everyone understands this, that although it was a serious matter and justice supposedly would be the outcome there, with all these different people, employees, people who are going to end up paying to be there, although they do not look at it as being part of an audience, that we have a continuing process that anything resembling individual consciousness at just any ordinary level is a very spasmodic thing that just hits all around like gunfire. That at any particular moment, out of the 200 people in the courtroom, you look around, the judge, half the attorneys, half the defendants waiting, are in this kind of semi-somnambulistic state. But if you looked at the courtroom as being just one entity, one man's consciousness, or if it had its own consciousness, then and you looked at the 200 people in there as being individual neural connections, it's just firing over here, and then it's over here, and it's over there, reflected in the fact that the individuals there are going. The nightclub. I use the courtroom first because nightclub, I know we got booze in there, which really changes the complexion, but forget that. In the nightclub, you have the same thing going on. But now looking at it as being diffused consciousness, as represented by the Temptations. Diffused consciousness is just one, I just selected that word because it represents one way of looking at it, that inside of an ordinary man and inside of all men collectively at the ordinary level, consciousness is diffused. It only appears to be focused when there is apparently some external stimuli that will bring about a man's attention being focused on something. Such as in the nightclub, a bouncer suddenly turns around to one guy and says, hey, did you pay to get in? Maybe you stand just inside the door. He's just kind of like this. The bouncer says, hey, did you pay? The guy goes, oh, yeah, I paid. And just before that, his eyes are open. He's not in bed asleep. He's not down to the kind of brain pattern that's indicative of one actually being asleep. But you understand, there he stands. His eyes are focused maybe on the dance floor, up at the temptations, the faux temptations. But everyone knows the difference. And the guy punches and says, hey, did you pay to get in? Or get out of the door? It's something, an external stimuli, and he goes, oh yeah, I paid. That is what people consider to be the ordinary level of consciousness. They look at that as being the norm. When it's spoken of, when it's described by psychologists, if you tried to engage an ordinary person in a discussion of consciousness, that is what they assume to be. Without any analyzation, and obviously no proof, not even any evidence, but they take that to be the normal state of consciousness, and they see this as being momentary lapses. They see that to be the exception. They see that to be anomalous to the ordinary state of consciousness. They've got no choice. It is absolutely, demonstratively false. You know it in you if you know anything, and if you don't know it in you, just turn around if you can hold your... See, that's always the problem. Trying to get somebody to observe this, because it's like everyone is born with faulty eyeballs. Let's use eyeballs as a metaphor for consciousness, and you try to point out to people that people's eyeballs are not as round, they are not as operational as they could be. And the person with the faulty eyeballs goes, well, they look fine to me. And you go, well, yeah, but you're looking through the same kind of eyeballs that you're trying to examine these faulty eyeballs. The guy goes, I'm looking, I don't see anything. But you understand? Yeah, right, okay. But that is it. And you tell people that is not what you're calling the guy that suddenly got alert in the doorway when the bouncer said, hey, did you pay to get in? And the guy goes, oh yeah. If you told an ordinary person, you say, you take that as being the ordinary state of consciousness. You take that as being man's normal, natural, God-given state of consciousness. When the guy goes, yeah, I paid. Because now something has his attention. He don't know whether he's going to have to pay twice, or maybe he did slip in. He figures I got caught, or he wonders whether the bouncer's going to deck him. But something external. There was a stimuli that brought his attention out of this staring state, this unfocused state. Yeah, because now it is focused due to an external stimuli. You cannot get ordinary people to see that that is not the normal state. It is not. They will admit that, oh yeah, I drift off and daydream. They could hear my example and say, yeah, people do stand around and just kind of stare and drift off, but I mean, that's just normal. But you can't really call that consciousness. They'd want to call that some lower state of consciousness or some partially distracted daydreaming. That state, I'm not going to start giving statistics, but you can look at it yourself. That state that they would consider to be the exception, the staring state, that's totally unfocused, almost not at home state. It is as natural to man, it is as common to man as the state that men take to be consciousness. Now, that should not be a sermon by now. It's always kind of a shock when you're faced with it, whether you hear it from me and you actually hear it, or whether you do it to yourself again for the, we won't say how many millionth time, but it's still always kind of a little shock to realize, well, what people assume. And not just you, it's not that people are dumb. Psychologists, psychiatrists, neurologists, well, they would look at it a different way if they had the right kind of statistics now from the kind of technology they have from brain operations. But they still would not see one state as being natural and the other, they would not see what I'm describing as being as natural a state to man as any other. Back to why I was calling it unfocused. And I could switch this around, you understand, and I can certainly use other terms, because in one sense, just to show you, breakdown of words if you need any further evidence, you could call this unfocused when the guy's standing at the doorway going, you could call it focused. That you could call it focused, that is, he's just kind of focused on to nothing. Or focused on to his own daydreams. You understand? Then you could call it unfocused, that they shook him out of it when the bouncer said, "Did you pay?" You go, "Oh yeah." But at any rate, let's go back to my original. Man's ordinary state of consciousness it's a fair description to call it unfocused. And it is a fair description, open to anyone's observation who can see somewhere besides cracked eyeballs, beyond cracked eyeballs, is to see that this unfocused state, to where that if you could suddenly jump, I could jump in your brain, or you could jump into your own brain and go, "What were you just thinking?" You don't know. Were you conscious just then? And you go, "Well, I'm not in bed asleep, I don't think." You go, what? Can you call what you were just doing conscious? And you were staying there waiting on the bus, waiting in line somewhere, driving the car, anything just. But when you come out of that state, if something makes you come out of the state, the bouncer, the judge calls your name, somebody blows their horn behind you in traffic, at the traffic light when you're going, you don't take into account that state. But it is just in toto a fair description of consciousness is unfocused. That a man is not behind it. There is no little man in your brain. There is no I, whether you be Mary or Fred, behind consciousness, going, all right, with hands-on controls like handlebars or a mouse or the handles to a video game. There is nobody back there running controls saying, all right, here's where you should be focusing your attention. You should hold your consciousness here and over here and do this and that. There is no one. It's just, you're conscious. If you ask people, are you conscious? And people say, well, yeah. And they can't say more about it. It's just there. If it's unfocused, it doesn't matter that what you seem to be entertained by, to wit, the fake temptations, it doesn't matter. Because if attention is unfocused, it doesn't matter what's there. It is only when you try to be individually conscious. It's only when you try and drag your own consciousness away from that which is running, the courtroom, the nightclub, traffic, life itself. It's only when you drag it from there that then you become Edgar Winter. Because then you have to show up. There is no ifs, ands, or no exceptions. You can't say, well, maybe I can pass. I got a guy that I painted him up to look like an albino and put him on a long wig. Maybe he'll pass. There's no degree. There's no room for improv, for fakery. You have to show up. I was going to point out several things that this does along the way to the great holy grail of some, if we'll assume, if you already assume that the state of being enlightened or awakened is something more permanent than just the running battle to try to be more awake or more enlightened. But somewhere between here and there, I was going to point out the effect, the usable effect that this has. When you understand that the energy running the nightclub, running the fake temptations, running the courtroom, that the energy out there running it, the only way that you can put up with it is it's the same energy running you, consciously. There is just no difference. I can't resist asking you a rhetorical question. Why is it that you will put up with the fake temptations? That is, why will you put up with life as it's described, as it is reputed to be, when you know? If you begin to look at all, you look out there and you realize it's all just an illusion. It's bullshit. No one has described it correctly. Once you can just see plainly, it's just not what you always took to be life. Physically, it's still there. You still see physically, materially, the same things. But insofar as the consciousness of it, you realize I have never been conscious of it. This is as though I've been looking through some sort of cracked lens, through some kind of haze, some kind of fog, or it's been like a screen with little holes in it that just keeps flashing by, and a hole hit up here, and I can see for a second, and then down here, and then over here, which is just another description of that kind of gunfire over the city, first over here, then there, these little flashes that you're just When you understand that energy is the same energy, that there's no operational, there's no functional distinction between the audience watching the fake temptations and the fake temptations and the nightclub and the city where it is and the planet and life. That there is no difference. There is no philosophical difference. There's nothing to discuss. Your consciousness is the same thing. What I was going to ask you rhetorically is how else will people put up, you understand the metaphor I assume by now, of them putting up with the fake temptations. That they will stand there at the door and pay $5 and say, this is the Temptations, right? I loved them back in college. Motown, to me, was it. But the creme de la creme was the Temptations. God, you think they're going to do My Girl? Bouncer said, sure they will. And you hand me your $5 and you say, of course, it's not the original Temptations. They're all dead. You know that, don't you? And the bouncer may or may not know. But assuming he'll go, well, do you want to come in or not? And you go, oh, yeah, I just, making chit-chat. And you pay your $5, pay $10, you bring in a girlfriend. And you're paying money to go see a fraud. And smiling, saying, happy to do it. Keeping in mind the total, all-engulfing metaphor that represents, as per my intention, the only way that people can put up with that is the fact that what's running that, the fake, what's running the temptations, the fake act, is the same thing that brought you there. It's the same thing that's running your consciousness when you go to the door and say, they are here tonight, aren't they? Bouncer, the doorman says, yeah. What if he even says, well, yeah, they're here, but by the way, I want to be sure that there's no misunderstanding. You know that all the temptations are dead. That this is, some other guy's carrying on. You go, oh, yeah. What brings this on? What makes people go to a priest? What makes people pursue religion where other humans are describing gods? They're no more than humans with their flaws exaggerated. These other humans who are describing this tell you that they know what's going on after death when you know damn well they don't. When they say that they can intercede with the cosmic forces when you know damn well they can't. Why do you do it? Why do humans do it? They have no choice. Because if the same energy running everything, nightclubs, fake temptations, religion, politics, education, life itself, but especially man's civilization, which is an output of consciousness, when the same energy running that is the same energy running you, which is supposed to be, you've got no choice. You are absolutely helpless and never know it. It is why men can be defrauded in ways their name considered to be defrauded, because I am not saying religion is a fraud in the sense that, as you know, that critics of religion say it. It's not a criticism of religion, because it's everything in life. None of it can do what it purports to do. It's not supposed to, but it can't do it. And men do not complain. When men complain, they themselves become an anomaly. If a man gets too virulent in his denunciation of religion, even atheists will go, calm down. I mean, if a guy just goes wild and says, well, let's burn down the churches or something, any reasonably educated and sophisticated atheist will go, come on, it's, we can't start that, you're crazy. Hell, join the Atheist Society, wear a pin. But, calm down. Just simply in one sense, I'm not going to stay here because you surely know this by now, at one level, it's nonverbal, it's not subconscious. It is it's below the level of consciousness, but it's not a subconscious mind, it is man pre-consciousness. That everyone knows that the world deriving from consciousness, everyone knows it's a fraud. They know it. Art reveals it, politics reveals it, all literature reveal it. They just don't look at it that way. That could be a whole nother night or two of me talking. But everyone knows that. And I don't mean subconsciously, and it's not a fraud. Everyone knows that the real temptations are dead. Everyone knows that Jesus is dead. Moses is dead. Everybody knows that. It's not a secret. And people still show up at church and say, is Jesus here today? And they go, sure thing. They know he's not. They know it's a fake temptations going up here today and run mass. And they pay their money. But it does no good. Only an ordinary idiot picks on one thing and says, I knew it, religion's no good. Religion's a fraud. Everything's a fraud. And the only way, it's just that some people say, well, I won't fall for this fraud, and all they're saying is, well, I've fallen for some other fraud. I can only fall for one fraud. I'm a professional atheist. That's their fraud. Hell, I can't put up with religion. I got too much invested in being an atheist. I'm the international vice president. Everyone knows that out here is by and large is just a fraud. But no one, no sane person, none of those in the middle of the parade is upset by it. Again, people who are upset are on the fringe. It is just one of the definitions of being fringe. It's one of the definitions of being intellectually questionable, mentally questionable. That if you are too vigorously opposed to some aspect, some mainstream aspect of society, people that just go crazy about art, anti-art. There are plenty. There's a large segment of the middle class, the middle stream of civilization, of humans on this planet that think that most art is some sort of joke or just a bunch of idiots and people on dope and all that. And they never go to museums. They wouldn't certainly buy a book on art. But if somebody just goes crazy about let's burn down the museums, everyone understands, calm down. Because they holler, well, it's a fraud. And quiet middle class people may go, well, sure it's a fraud. But it's like, well, you're a bigger fraud, something's worse than you because that's no big, why are you so shocked? I've always thought that. The reason it cannot be seen as a fraud, it cannot be seen as being shortchanged. You literally have no ability to see it as a fraud. And we're talking here. It's not that you're lacking information. There are no courses that says how to see through the frauds of civilization. And if I'm wrong, there is such a course, it's a fraud. You can take that to the bank. But there are no reputable courses saying how to spot frauds in society, or how to spot the frauds that men have wrought. Them old rotten frauds. People do not do that because the whole thing is a fraud. But the men have when I'm starting to say, there is no way for you to learn from another man, from some other man's mind to say, well, let me tell you how to spot the frauds in civilization. Not just the obvious ones, but he can't do it. He may take your money. He may give you a diploma. You may get through and say you enjoy it. You may recommend the course. But you understand, everything is still operating at this same level. Men have no wherewithal, consciously, to spot the frauds, or the fraud that is the the civilization that is the output of man's consciousness. Canaries cannot tell what's going on in a lemon storm. You remember that one? They simply cannot. They can look, no matter what happens. You say, well, do you see the lemons? To them, everything's lemon. You can try to say, well, some of them are a little more yellow than others, or some of them, you can try trying to define it in some more specific way. But to a canary in a lemon storm, everything's yellow. And you understand, for canaries in there to start, well, wait a minute. I begin to see certain fallacies in some of these lemons. And for them to start telling other canaries, if you're outside that sort of scenario, then you would say, well, that's insane. That poor little canary saying that, he doesn't see any more than the rest of them. No, he doesn't. But the rest of them can't see any more either. When your attitude toward life is left to when your understanding of life is left to the unfocused flow of consciousness, which is the same consciousness running the things that you think you're conscious of, I was going to point out, not only can you not ever see the frauds of life, but I could extract the word fraud, you cannot ever see anything. You can talk to other people, you entertain other people's suggestions, you read books, you go to lectures, and at the ordinary level you can believe You can insist that you have learned something that you can see more clearly than you previously did, and you do not. But there's no one to tell you you did not. Or if they do, you can dismiss it. But from the other view, I was going to say, once you begin to see that, some of the, in a certain way, operational, what you're freed from, and its benefit, I think, will become obvious. If you see, without any exception, that the energy running life, not man, not the conscious energy of man, even in those areas that are strictly identifiable as being the output of men's consciousness, the judicial system, the nightclub. When you see the same energy running life as running men's consciousness of it, you have no further interest, none, in what other people say or think. How could you? Once you see it. It might not sound as beneficial to somebody, but you also almost, if you could hold that condition, you have no interest in entertainment, which is the same thing. I hit this kind of a glancing blow some time back, but all forms of entertainment is to keep a man from thinking. It's to keep a man from being a hermit inside of his own head. Now I can't imagine any ordinary person ever understanding that. But if you ask somebody, when do you go to a movie? When do you turn on television? And they'll give you all kinds of reasons. There's only one reason. For somebody to run their mind. And I don't mean somebody out there. It appears that way. But people's ordinary conscious, an ordinary man's consciousness, to him, has got to have external stimuli. They consider it to be a beneficial. If I present it to them the right way, they would probably, many people, not necessarily all people, but most ordinary people, would say without external stimuli, they would not be conscious. People say, well, let's go to a movie. And if you say, well, why do you go to movies? I could drag this out as long as you could stand to listen, but you know how it goes. And if somebody said, are you serious? And you go, yeah, why do you go to movies? And they go, so, well, I like them. Well, why do you like them? Well, they're entertaining. Well, how do they entertain you? Well, a comedy makes me laugh. A love story sometimes makes me cry. But, I mean, you call it entertainment. Yeah, that's entertainment. You could go on and try to narrow it down to finally they'd probably see if Socrates had any hemlock left over. They'd weary of it very shortly. But to turn on television, to listen to the radio, to listen to a lecture, to go to a movie, is one reason that there a man stands or there a man sits, and it's just him and his mind, him and his consciousness, which is not his consciousness. But he considers that here I am, I'm all alone, I'll call some friends. Maybe he calls them, let's get together. And he feels better as soon as he starts, somebody on the other end says, hi, and he says, hey, this is Bill. And he says, oh, hi, Bill. And he already feels better. It's as though, and nobody thinks this way, but it's as though this consciousness is just kind of unfocused and floating around in him. At least now, it's like something anchored it. There's got some reason to exist. Dials. Hello? Oh, hey, Bill, this is John. Hey, Bill. Hey, John. And it's like then his consciousness has a reason to live. He doesn't have to call Jack Kevorkian. I will not die. Or I will not become such a hermit that I'll suffer terminal internal cabin fever and just wilt. Ordinary consciousness in the individual, with ordinary people, seems to require, to them, a continuing external source of stimuli. Think about it. Now, you may think, as soon as I said this, some of you by now may go, well, sure, that's obvious, get to the point. No, that is a real point. I'm going somewhere else. Because people do not ordinarily think about that. They will give you every reason in the world. Why do you watch TV? Well, which show are you talking about? Well, any show. Well, which one? Well, why do you turn on the radio? Well, I get information. Why do you watch the news? Well, I won't keep up. It's all one thing. They want external stimuli for this. People do not want to be alone. Humans are physically, that is non-consciously gregarious, pack animals to start with. Big deal. So are hyenas. But they are consciously. In one sense, This is almost another night or two sometime. But up here, they are as much a pack animal. That's why I keep referring to collective consciousness. They are as much. They are probably more gregarious, in need of gregariousness up here than they are physically. Because people can get along. Men and women can live without a mate. They can live alone. But they cannot. Ordinary people cannot get along without human companionship in one way. Just go down to the corner at the Dunkin' Donut and have breakfast. I always be out somewhere, walking around a shopping center. They need a companionship specifically up here, not just physical. They need it up here. That is what they, without any sort of analyzation, that is what all forms of entertainment is doing. And it's simple once you see it. I mean, like I said, some of you probably went, well, that's simple, get on to the point. No, it is simple like all of it. But notice how it's not simple. People, ordinary, educated, smart, intelligent people would argue you to the floor if you said all forms of entertainment. God forbid you said everything you do up here. But if you said all forms of entertainment is simply your consciousness wanting something out there to stimulate it. So it won't be alone. It doesn't want to sit home alone. They go, nah. You go, yeah. They go, you're wasting your time. Because they would find every exception in the world. If they really took it as being a serious comment and they wanted to argue it, they would probably pick out some example of which they were not inclined to pursue that other people do and point that out and say, well, yeah, you're talking about people who turn on television and just sit there, the classic couch potato, I guess. And you just turn it on and just sit there and it doesn't make a damn what's on, you just sit there and stare at it for 5 hours. Yeah, those people, now, I don't understand it, but I guess so. Now, when I watch television, it's selective. I'll get the schedule and I'll see what's on PBS or the art channels, and if it's not something I like on, I won't watch it. I'll turn the radio. I'll read a book. And I'll let somebody entertain me from afar. It is all the same thing. That's all it is. At the ordinary bullshit level, it appears to have other outputs. If somebody goes to hear a lecture, they may say afterwards that they learned something that could make them money to be good for their business. Or somebody can say they watch TV and learn some new interesting facts. They can say all of that. But they did it all for one reason, that was to keep their consciousness, to keep their own mind from just sitting there going. It's to keep them from staying home alone, up here. Once you see that everything running entertainment, everything running life out there is the same thing that's running here, you're not angry, you're not upset, you just simply, maybe some of you can even see it in theory if nothing else, you have no longer any interest, any real interest in what any other human has to say. Because if you can do that, you do not need the intermediary of humans. You can begin to hear life talking. Yeah. And why listen to a second-hand translation? And I'm being charitable. But you've got no interest. That don't mean you're angry, and it doesn't mean you might not listen to somebody else talk. But insofar as some other human, be they John Q. Public, laying in the gutter, man on the corner, or whether it be Dr. So-and-so, Professor so-and-so, or Rabbi so-and-so, and you go, well, now this could be, very important. You know it's not important. No offense, you just got no interest. Because once you understand the energy running life is running that, it's changed your consciousness already. And so get past thinking this is some sort of critique of what ordinary people say. You can then listen to life directly, which has always been there, just talking his head off. But you don't hear it. Because if you're operating at the ordinary level of consciousnness, like everybody else, they're always looking, well, what's going on here? Do we have freedom of will? Is there a God? Why do people act like they do? Have they discovered where the subconscious is in the brain yet? All of this stuff. And all of it is almost like a smokescreen, verbally and otherwise, orally, to hide what life's saying. Because all of this is just, it's the difference between hearing Kermit and Miss Piggy talk up here in those fake voices and actually getting to know, get beneath there, and there's Jim Henson. You go, hi, Jim's planning all this. You talk, well, you don't even have to talk, you listen directly to the source. The two happen together. That's what I was trying to get at, so that you don't take it as being a theory when I say you lose all interest in what anybody else thinks. You do. But it happens as a result of the fact that when you see that the energy running the courtroom, the energy running the judicial system, the energy running the Italian government, if there was such a thing, the energy running the artistic life of Poland, if there was such a thing, the energy running PBS, NBC, the Metropolitan Opera, the energy running everything is the same energy running the consciousness of all humans. There's nothing else to listen to. You then listen to the energy running life, because that's the direct source. And I'm not going to try to make it sound spooky, and I can't tell you that's the same sort of talk that people do, but you can certainly look out. How else do you think that whoever you were impressed with in the past to read the words of a Buddha or Muhammad or some Sufi poet or someone and go, that the words, they're just human words, and you go, and it just strikes you like, how did he ever say that? How did he think that? In a sense, he didn't. When it's real metaphysical thought, when it's real mystical thought, real transcendental thought, if someone tries to put it into words, what he's trying to put into words was him hearing life talk directly. That's why that these mystics and people that pop up always seem to be so original. They seem to see sui generis, that there is no precedent for them, that Buddha did not issue out of the Hindu tradition. I mean, I can say he did. Jesus was not a Jew. I mean, sure he was culturally and racially. That was not Judaism, and Muhammad was not paganism revisited. You can say they were. Well, I'm saying, in a sense, these kinds of people that pop up, it is as though they came from nowhere, what they finally said. Why was that? Because they were not refining, refurbishing what they had already heard. They got past that point and could hear life talk, and when they tried to describe it, as best they could, well, when they described it, assuming they did try, then it came out saying like, Jesus, I would have never thought of that. Even though to many people it just seemed, well, damn, I should have known that. That's just common sense. Or as soon as you read some words that one of those guys supposedly said or wrote, and you think about it and you go, well, that's just as plain, but you should also be aware of the fact that you would have never thought it. It could just be a 4, 5, 6 word sentence that could have floored you. Most people that goes through the early stages of seeking out the mystical path at least found 1 or 2 writers or mystics or books that just became their vademecum for a while. And just things you'd open it up anywhere that some Zen writer, some Sufi poet or some Hindu scribe, and just like you could keep opening it up and just almost every time you did, it just floor you. You think, just one sentence. You think, my God. And it just seems so true. There's no doubt when you read it, but you should have also somewhere along the line thought, how did he ever come up with that? Which is also one of the ways that people come up with the idea that men have come up with the notions of gods. It's like, well, hey, that man couldn't have been an ordinary person. I mean, because no ordinary person ever saw that before. But they never asked themselves, well, wait a minute. It's not spooky. The thing that just impressed me just then about him, as soon as I read it, I thought, that's true. It is not otherworldly, it's not weird, it's not spooky, it is just true. It's as true and obvious as the face on your nose. But then you should think, but I would have never figured that out. I would have never thought that when it was just right there. Then ordinary people, if they ever carried any further, they ascribe it some supernatural gift, or that the people who saw it themselves were supernatural, and they were not. They simply bypassed that intermediate step of listening to people talk. They got past that point and realized that the energy that's running life is the energy running man, consciously, as he calls it. And when you see that, you simultaneously, you quit listening to people. That is, to take it to be of anything of importance, because you can then listen to life. If you get any grip on that, you understand also why meditation, seclusion from life, suppression reduction, at least, if not suppression, of external stimuli has been a historic approach to mysticism. In the midst of our busy day, even now it's considered by many people, it's almost mainstream here in the West right now, to meditate. Psychologists, psychiatrists are saying we don't understand it necessarily, but it seems to have some salubrious effect on many people. If you can just take 5 minutes and go sit down in a chair. Just sit down, don't turn off the TV and the radio, close the door, sit there by yourself, and just try and relax. Just try and let your mind relax. And people try it, if they can do it for a couple of minutes, they go, I love it. They need some reason normally that somebody... Anyway, people understand that it has the ability to refresh one, that it seems to be beneficial. And that's just, we're talking about everyday people nowadays. When I consider those that believe that they are following some extraordinary path, the first thing they came up with, the most ancient descriptions of any sort of discipline or method of attempting to increase one's consciousness, to bring one to some other internal state, without a doubt has been meditation. Some of the older writings would have called it prayer, but it's the same thing. That is, to remove yourself from what? The external stimulations as much as possible. The very thing that drives ordinary people's consciousness, or that keeps them to the level, spasmodically, periodically, reoccurringly so, to go from, oh, yeah, I paid, yeah. Okay, all right. Hey, watch it. Hey, you with some? That kind of thing. That was my man at the doorway watching the fake temptations. The very thing that makes an ordinary man appear to have moments of increased lucidity. That is, from the guy at the doorway and the bouncer punches him, said, you paid? And he goes, oh, yeah, I paid. That's the kind of stimuli without which an ordinary man, look at it this way, there would be the possibility that ordinary people, for longer and longer periods of time, and if you're not aware of the fact, there are even places on the planet now, you don't have to go there, just watch PBS, see some of the, they normally don't dwell on it, but get into less civilized areas of the world. There's still places where there's more tribal conditions, no great external stimuli, they have to produce their own, but anyway, if they will do a film, if they just go around the village, the kids and everybody just sitting around, if they're not physically involved, which is usually what makes up for it, that they're, it's all balanced, that the less they're living under civilized conditions, the more they are confronted with day to day, almost hour to hour, concerns of staying alive. That is, the women are sitting there all day, beating up some kind of grain to make bread, or they're down at the river washing clothes, the men are out with the cattle. But if they catch them late in the afternoon, and you just see, and there'll be a film, if it's people, that they're being driven more by the body and less by the mind than we are, let's say here in Albania, then you'll get a look, you can see it, that they will stare for longer periods of time. This is not either good or bad here nor there, but you understand the less that they are living in the world of the mind, that they're still by and large, they've got greater physical concerns of survival from the level of consciousness down, the more they can. And not find it unusual. You understand? At any rate. To get out of the state of unfocused consciousness, you have to become Edgar Winter, Rick Derringer. I can get more obscure. Roy Head. You have to be there in person. You have to, in a sense, suppress the external stimuli that's driving everyone else and yours ordinary consciousness. But the thing is, it is not absolutely necessary to physically secrete oneself away from it. Now, in one sense, everyone would have to agree that if you were going to devote your life full time, that was all you're going to do, you could not say with any sense of genuineness that it would not be profitable, if you knew what you were doing, to cut out as much external stimuli as possible, if you understood it, by such things as perhaps a retreat into the woods. But there is, as always, it is so sticky and so tricky, because the kinds of people right now, and there are plenty of them still in the world, that right now are in monasteries, whatever they're called, would be work schools, situations where they have, as a group, recluse themselves from ordinary society and say that they are on some mystical track, that they are undertaking to become closer to the cosmos or to God or to Allah, and that their primary rule is no talk, and of course no radios, no television, none of that, and that they spend many hours a day in quiet meditation. Sound like one person maybe already got it. I'm just going to say it, and it's one of these things that is extremely flypaper-ish, for those of you that like that better than viscid. It is extremely sticky, because those involved with it don't know what they're doing exactly. Because if you knew what you were doing, you would not be in a group situation doing it. That if you understood that it could be of benefit personally, you would be a one-man monastery. And of course no one would know it. And I mean even physically, if you were going to do it, you'd go off and become a one-man hermit. You'd be a one-man monastery. Because you do not understand fully. I'm just going to, like I said, say it, and maybe you can figure it out sometime. But if a man really understood what the purpose of trying to cut out the external stimuli was, he would not be in a group, because any group has a purpose. That, well, we want to return to the love of Allah. We want to become one with the lover, as the Sufi poets supposedly would have it, for instance. And if you go, that's it. That's exactly it. No, it ain't. No, it ain't. It's closer than going to movies, maybe. It's closer than watching TV the rest of your life. But to say, that's it, no, no, no. You can get closer than that. Because you can't have a point to it. You cannot have some point that comes from ordinary consciousness. And if they say, well, the point of meditating is to see the face of God. No, it's not. And they say, yes, it is. And you realize, well, you're right, it is. And then leave. But it doesn't matter what they say. If there's a purpose to it, where did they get the purpose? Now, I threw in the obvious, to get closer to God. How about this? You ask somebody, why are you meditating? Why did you join this monastery? Because we want to be able to repaint refrigerators. You go, that's not the point. And they go, yes, it is. And you realize, well, you're right, it is. You understand? It doesn't matter. As long as they think there's a point to it. And if they think there's a point to it, where did they get that? They didn't make it up. Nobody there did. They go, well, he told me. No, our leader told us. Well, our leader said God told him. It's simply your proof. Anybody that's part of a mystical group is not a mystic. Anyone who is meditating in a group of people has a name. And if they have a name, they don't know what the aim is. And they go, yeah, we do. It's here on the wall. But they don't know what it is. There is no aim. Not that can be described from out here. That if some other person tells you the point of trying to be more conscious, the point of trying to meditate is such and such, once you see for yourself that the energy running everything, I didn't leave out any, And I said entertainment, politics, etc. I include mysticism. The same is running everything in here in ordinary. Anything that another human tells you, well, the point of this is to do so and so. No, it's not. He's not wrong, but that's not true. You're getting it second, third, 2,000th handed. And I even hate to say the numbers, because then someone, I guess, could think, wait a minute, all I've got to do is take everything people say and try to double it or cut in half. It's not even numerical. It's just that you will never get what the point is from another human. And once you see that the energy running, life is running them, you understand that, and then simultaneously you quit listening to other people. You're not mad, it's just a great relief. You have finally got the static off of your particular radio, and now you can listen to live. And the rest of it's just something to do. How you doing? All right. Okay. How's it going? Okay. All right. That's it. The other guy could be talking about matters metaphysical and life after death, but as far as you're concerned, it's, hey, okay, all right. You got it, huh? But I want you to understand, when I was talking about entertainment, to tie it all together, all of human intercourse, the entertainment that you go pay for, in a sense, you're paying to stay unfocused. You're paying to keep from having to sit there by yourself and what can you do by yourself? Let's assume you don't have any electronic appliances at your apartment, and you sit there. What can you do? An ordinary man can do almost nothing. He'll sit there and get into this kind of somnambulistic state to the point that he'll begin sleep. He could just been out of bed 3 or 4 hours and not physically tired, but there is no external stimuli to his consciousness. It's like this ordinary state that a man can stand there by the door watching the fake temptations. And he's not really watching them. If you suddenly say, what did they just sing? What was the line they just sang of that song? Huh? This state of just staring will get so strong with an ordinary man if he had no stimuli, sitting there at home, that even though he's not physically sleepy, it just began to overtake him. Normally, people will not put up with that. Normally, they will do whatever it takes to get some stimuli. If nothing else, simply they'll think, well, I just got to get out of the apartment. They've called everyone they know. No one's home. They don't have money to go to the movie. They're broke. They will go out just to go outside. They go, well, I just got to go outside. You know, shit, geez, I'm going nuts or something. They won't go outside and they'll talk to strangers. Or at least their car go by too fast to where they can go, God damn, where's the cops when they... There'll have to be some external stimuli to keep their consciousness going, or they find it to be unacceptable. They find it to be irritating. But understand now, in another sense, one of the few things that you can almost diametrically compare them, someone attempting to be more conscious is almost diametrically opposed to that. That you are not seeking external stimuli. But now notice those who professionally go and meditate and seclude themselves as a group. See, they don't understand that. They think, well, we got to get away from these certain kinds of stimuli. No. That's not it. Not certain kinds. They go, yeah, it is. Look at all the greed. Look at all the blasphemy. Look at all the non-metaphysical, non-mystical things going on out in the world. We just want away from it. There is no judgment. Once you see that that energy is the same running consciousness, that's what I said. It's not a critique when I say that you no longer have any interest in what another human has to say. Any human, you've got no personal interest because you know what it is. That's not a criticism. It's a complete lack of interest. It's like it's now background noise and you can listen to life directly. You can only do it personally. And once you get that stage, I was also going to point out, if you're taking no external stimuli in a serious way, there's simply no nourishment there. It's not a decision you make. You don't decide, well, I'll quit listening to people. It just happens. You just know what it is. You're just freed from it. But then I was going to say, then you might ask yourself, well, what do you do then? It is then that I am tempted to say that you almost began to educate yourself. But that is, you begin to listen to life, you can see what's going on just plain and direct, without the outside interference, without the analyzation, without the distraction of everybody else trying to interpret it. Because for those of you biblical scholars, for those of you that worry over the fact that archaeologically they cannot seem to, in a definitive way, actually locate even the foundation or any remnants of the Tower of Babel, they're not looking in the right place. Oh, I know they're over there in the eastern side of the Mediterranean, looking around for the great Tower of Babel. There's no need to leave home. Just open your window and look outside, and there it is. Without that kind of stimuli, what will stimulate consciousness? What would be left? I was being somewhat facetious to say you then begin to educate yourself. Life begins to educate you directly, but in a sense, you become the only translator. That nobody can tell you anything else, because you realize nobody knows anything. They're all Miss Piggy. They're all the fake temptations. But life is not a fake. Life doesn't fool around. When life talks, it doesn't hesitate. It doesn't speak in metaphors. It just goes, bah! And you think, well, I never noticed that before. And life doesn't stare. It doesn't look off, and life doesn't go, and you have to wait, like, well, how long will it be till life comes back to consciousness and I learn something? It never stops. That does not mean, by the way, that you cannot, in a sense, learn from what other people are saying, but it's not what they're saying. It's what you realize is going on in life, and making men say that, and you think, well, now I realize why all my life, well, I could never understand other people, or now I understand why everybody says, well, I don't understand these other people. It's a good thing that you might say that everyone has not adopted that advertising approach and slogan of one Wall Street brokerage firm, to where if everybody listened when life talked, where would we be? People like us would have no hobby whatsoever. That is, if everyone was mystics, whew. Well, I'm going to have to stop. I'm getting depressed thinking about that.